and another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. Of course, this is the January 6th, 2026 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. Yeah, we've got a lot of interesting things right there for you today. And I thought I would start off with something that happened in January of 1919. So if you've been following me, we're building a network of people who are very interested in this information. It's not all about big numbers, because I do hear some people going for some very big numbers in subscribers. No, I'm not going like that. But what I am going for is people who are dedicated and people who can not only listen to this broadcast, but can contribute to it in very informative ways. So we need 22 people to get to 500 subscribers, and that would be quite an accomplishment, because we're doing probably about 100 subscribers a month. And so certainly I want to make sure that everybody is participating and enjoying these kind of conversations, because we go deep. We don't mess around here. And like I said, we don't have a lot of foolishness and all of that. So I encourage you to put your comments here. And if you have statements or something you want to make sure they're intelligent, because I will sure block them and we'll keep moving right along without you. So anyway, this is today's edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. And I see Pastor Carmine has already started listening. Thank you very much, Pastor Carmine Woods out of South Central. Yeah, his brother was quite the baseball player too as well. And he's somebody who knew Chet Brewer, who I talk about on this broadcast real frequently, who had such an impact there in Southern California. So let's get busy, because I have a few things to cover, and you will find them kind of interesting. So we're going to start with January 6th, 1919, under an article titled "Negro League Could Be Made a Success." A Kansas City Post newspaper reporter stated, "There is no good reason why an organization of 8 teams in an all-colored league should not succeed." The writer, whose name remained nameless, also added, "We have seen some of the very best baseball played between colored teams, and have enjoyed ourselves and laughed more at a game played between colored teams than any white team we ever watched on the field." And that's kind of interesting. First of all, let me unpack that one before I give this last statement. In order for black teams to be a success and for white patrons to come out, they always had to have some kind of gimmick to make people laugh. Now, they had some pretty good people that would do that. I know Papa Watkins around the turn of the century, and one of my favorite players, Bill Monroe, or they could make you laugh. And at the same time, Bill Monroe was probably the greatest shortstop in America. So he can make you laugh, and then he's going to beat you like you wouldn't. You can't imagine how he's going to make you suffer. And when he played, Bill Monroe, he was actually, his father was a minister, and down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And actually, another guy who was a great guy, one of his teammates, was Rube Foster, whose father was also a minister. And I think I know. Bill Monroe's father was in the AME church, and Rube Foster's father, and Rube Foster, who was the first president of the Negro National League, who was a great pitcher, by the way, at turn of the century. This guy was winning 30 games in his sleep. He was so good, Rube Foster. And his father was a presiding elder of the United Methodist Church. And so, yeah, these are great legacies that aren't often talked about when it comes to black baseball. So anyway, it's one of those kind of things that I need to always address, because this is part of the history as well. They were playing baseball, but these guys were much more than baseball players, and their families were much more than baseball fans, all right? And so anyway, they figured for white folks to come in here, see these teams play, we've got to be doing something funny. It was like for their pure entertainment. But I tell you what, some of the greatest baseball players you would ever want to see played inside and outside of the Negro League. Just know that. And guess what? That's all joking aside. And then this article, when it finishes, it says, there seems to be only one danger of making this colored league a success. He said, and that is the fear that they'll challenge white teams. Can you imagine that? They're going to actually challenge white teams. And at the end of the season, that's when they would challenge them, and thereby cause intense race antagonism, not only between players, but the spectators as well. Guys, we've been watching baseball for the past 50, 60, some odd years of integrated baseball. Everything this man said never came to pass. And I think this is the fear that people continually bring on whenever sports were integrated, that it was going to be some race riots and going to be people violence and all this. It just never came to pass. But we did see baseball get elevated to a higher level, along with football, along with basketball, along with track and field, along with every sport where these African American athletes have participated. So you can argue with me, but you probably won't win that argument, because I think history will support me very well. All right, so let's go to another fact. January the 6th, 1921, just jumping a few years. And of course, they had the California Winter League. And of course, in the California Winter League, they would always send out teams. Now, they had just sent out two teams, the Lincoln Giants and the Los Angeles White Sox. They had played in California, and they're playing against Pacific Coast League. This is a white league, and also Major League ball players from the National American League that would come out. So the black major leaguers are playing the white major leaguers. What this guy feared would happen. Of course, there's no riots. There's, no fan antagonism and all of that. But they're playing against each other. So, but a newspaper, the Los Angeles Evening Post Record, tried to explain away why these black teams and these black major leaguers were winning so many games against these, quote, major leaguers, all right? And the major leaguers, I'm saying of American and National League, which we know were white. So in an attempt to explain why the Los Angeles White Sox and the Lincoln Giants had met and defeated some of the best players in the major leagues, and why various all-star teams have been humiliated. They didn't just lose, they were humiliated, according to this author here, over and over again. The Los Angeles Post Record. Now, these are white newspapers who are giving this. This is not anything that coming from the African-American press. He said, it is not thought to be that either the Giants or the White Sox are as good as the Coast League teams. So he's trying to tell you that they're inferior, which is a lie. And added, with the exception of a few players. No, there were a whole lot, because baseball is a team sport. So not one guy was beating you, not two guys. The team was beating you. The whole team was superior. That's why they were beating you, right? And so he said, with the exception of these few of these players, they are not in the big league class. So he's talking about the American National League. We know that was also a lie. This is all propaganda that a lot of us grew up with. Okay, the article stated, or they added, it must be remembered that the nationally famous players regard the winter ball much more in light of a vacation. And so they're taking vacations, of course, this article says. Now, what we know is crazy about this, because if you know anything about racism in America, whenever a black man or a white man lined up on an athletic field, you think that white guy wanted to lose that event? Come on, guys. If you know anything about racism in America, you know that they didn't plan on losing, and they didn't think they were going to lose, and they did not want to lose, even if they thought they were going to lose. They did not want to lose. So they tried to say, these guys, oh, they're out there taking vacation, so they're not serious, like if they were playing in the American National League. Oh, yeah, they were plenty serious. And I've talked to a number of players who, especially in the 40s and the 50s, who played against some of these African-American teams, and they'll tell you, they weren't joking, they were serious, right? I remember talking to Don Gutteridge often, who played many games against the Kansas City Monarchs through the state of Kansas, and he told me without exception that this was the case. They came to win, but these guys were outstanding players, and they never wanted to give these black men credit for their ability, right? Okay, I see I got somebody joining me from Minnesota. And now, of course, Pastor Carmine joining me from Kansas City, Missouri. All right. If anybody else comes in, just let me know. And again, my name is Phil Dixon. I'm an author and baseball historian. And uh, I specialize in talking about this subject, right? And I see Bob Poet, joining me. And Bob's always trying to catch me live, but rarely does. So, hey, Bob, it's good that you can catch me live today. Appreciate that. And Bob's giving me tremendous support. And since from the very first day I started this broadcast several months ago, so I appreciate that, Bob. So you probably missed just a little bit of the broadcast from the start, but you want to go back because we're getting kind of deep today, right? All right. So here we go. So we're talking about that, and let's see. Let's see. Okay, so the author in the end of this Los Angeles Evening Post record story from 1921 says, after he pretty much put down the black ball players as being inferior, which was not correct, he said this article is not meant to distract from the splendid ball of the two fast color teams playing, but it's merely given as a reason for the failure of the famous stars to win against the classy dark town teams. All right, you can make of it whatever you want to, but guess what, guys? These are the kind of things that were printed out there that I've always taken issue with, and I've always tried to break them down to show you what was going on inside the minds of people who were restricting African American ball players from playing in American national and minor leagues all over the nation. All right. Hey, I want to spotlight a player right now, too. Born January 6, 1933. If you follow baseball in the 1960s, you might remember him. Guy by the name of Charles Leonard Green. He went by Lenny Green. Of course, he was born in Detroit, Michigan on January the 6th. And he actually, how about this? He holds the Minnesota Twins single season record for 5 bases loaded walks. All right. And I think that's a record that still may be in existence. In 1962, he came up to bat with the bases loaded at least 5 times, and he forced a walk in all those times. So that guy probably fouled off a lot, had great pitch selection, and you didn't want him coming up in the clutch because the bases loaded, not only might get a hit, but he might just walk and still forcing that one run without even putting the ball into play. I remember when I was working with the Kansas City Royals, assistant director for public relations, and one of my activities during the game was to keep statistics. And I was in front of a computer, and I'd log every play. And I remember at that time, Pat Tabler, good friend of mine, Pat Tabler, went on to, he came to the Royals from Cleveland. And we used to have many good conversations. We'd go on a caravan. I remember going on a caravan where we would leave Kansas City, be gone for a couple of days. And Pat Tabler and Kevin Seitzer went with me on that caravan. And I'm going to mention something that happened to Kevin Seitzer in a minute. But and Pat Tabler would tell me about all kind of things. And I remember him telling me about a guy that was in their minor league system. And he ended up coming up. And I'm forgetting this guy's name right now, but he ended up being such a great player. So I'll call his name in a minute. But Pat, the first time I ever heard of this guy was from Pat Tabler. And so we would just talk baseball, and they always enjoyed me because I could talk about baseball in ways that the typical person who was in public relations could not. And so Pat Tabler was always a guy that, the guy I'm thinking about, if you remember one time, and somebody will give me his name, he was hit by a pitch and he refused to walk. What was his name? He refused to take his base because he wanted to hit. Somebody help me out. Somebody, who was that? You're a real fan. You know this guy's name. And the first time I heard about him was from Pat Tabler. He ended up like being a great power hitter as well. So somebody said, when you work for the Royals, did you ever run into Rush Limbaugh, who also worked for the Royals for a while? No, Rush had gone on. He was doing radio. He was doing radio in Kansas City. This is before he got to the national level. He was working for KMBZ, and he had been assistant director of marketing I was an assistant director of public relations, so the way they had the office split up, he would have been on the other side. So yeah, he had gone on, but yeah, there was always talk about who he was, and he was making a name for himself early on in radio at that particular time. But yeah, yeah, Rush Limbaugh had worked for the Kansas City Royals, and so yeah. Now Rush was from. Oh man, he was from. Oh shucks, I've been to that town, Cape Girardeau, Cape Girardeau, and Cape Girardeau had a team called the Kappa Halls. They used to play Negro League teams, and also Rush's had relatives who played for the Kappa Halls, who used to play against the Kansas City Monarchs in the 1940s and the 50s. Yeah, yeah, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. I've been down in that area many times and have presented all through that area there, all the way down to Sykeston and a bunch of other towns. If I start mentioning towns in Missouri, you guys, I would probably lose some of you because you would not know where these towns are. But most of you probably know about Rush Limbaugh. Okay, so somebody also mentioned Steve Busby. Steve Busby was there. He was a teammate of mine in high school. All right, yeah, Steve Busby was a great Royals legend. I remember he had hurt his arm, and actually, I think he threw two no hitters with the Royals, and he was trying to make a comeback, and he had been rehabilitation, but never fully made it back. But at one time, he was a top prospect for the Kansas City Royals without question. So yeah, definitely remember Steve Busby. I don't know if Steve Busby is still around Kansas City. Haven't seen him. Albert Bale, that is the person. Yeah, Albert Bale. Yeah, the first time I heard about Albert Bale was from Pat Tabler, who came to the Royals from the Cleveland organization, and we were just sitting around talking about baseball. He said, "Man, they got a great guy. He's on his way up by the name of." But they didn't call him Albert Bale at that time. I think they called him Joey Bale. I think that's what they were calling him at that time, Joey Bale. You go back and maybe check one of his early baseball cards. He's probably kind of like Dick Allen, who they had to change his name later on and change his name on his baseball cards. But yeah, I think it was Joey Bale, if I'm correct at the very beginning. So you can tell, hey, I follow baseball, and matter of fact, I'm thinking about getting me a press pass this year and going out and writing some stories and maybe doing a few broadcasts like this from the ball field with ball players and talk to them and let them talk to you. And I may do that because I still know people at the Royals, and they know me around Kansas City, and so getting a press pass wouldn't be that difficult. And we're still trying to promote the game nationally. So yeah, yep. Albert Bale, buddy, Joey Bale. Yeah, that's what that is here. All right. So Lenny Green, yeah. And how about this, Lenny Green? I'll finish up on Charles Lenny Green. In the 1960s, 1961, 1962, 1963, this guy was not a home run hitter, but believe me, guys, he had a home run for 3 consecutive years on opening day. I think that's quite an achievement. And most people have forgotten all about these guys. If you collected baseball cards like I did, you probably remember some of these guys. So that was Lenny Green. Yeah. Okay. Now, this was an interesting one. I had to go a little deep on this one, right? Because that's kind of what I do. I went a little deeper on this one, okay? So January 6, 1938, you got to get ready for this one. John Claybrook, age 66, and he was owner of the Claybrook Tigers. I don't know if you remember them, 1930s, double duty Radcliffe was the manager of the team. Double duty Radcliffe, 1936, I think he was, before he went to Cincinnati. And they had a bunch of guys from St. Louis who were on the team, the Claybrook Tigers. And they even came and played in my hometown at Ward High School field, which is still there. I haven't played there when I was a kid, but they played here in Kansas City. And once again, a lot of my stories about the Claybrook Tigers came from two people. I knew some of Claybrook's relatives who lived in Kansas City, and then also from Ted Duty Radcliffe, who I knew very well, and we talked about this team quite a bit. But at this particular time, he is in Myron, Arkansas, and he voted with 11 white men to send 2 African Americans to the electric chair on a charge of raping a white girl. So you could get capital punishment if you got convicted of a rape of a white woman. And The death verdict came at the end of a one-day trial and a 7-minute verdict. Just imagine this. Now, Claybrook established a precedent uh, for Crittenden County where no African American has served on a jury since Reconstruction. Wow. So he was the first African American to sit on that jury. So you can imagine that since Reconstruction. Now, here's the interesting thing. Remember, I said I was going to go a little deep on this. And it just so happened that this person I'm going to mention had two sons who played baseball, and that is Frederick Douglass. You probably remember him, the great civil rights leader, Frederick Douglass. In his 1852 speech, what a slave is to the 4th of July, what the 4th of July means to a slave, how you want to put it. Frederick Douglass stated that in the state of Virginia, there are 72 crimes for which a black man could receive capital punishment, punishment by death. 72. And how about this? There were only 2 for white men. Only 2. 72. This was his speech he gave in, what year was this? 1852. So guys, this is what the many African Americans have been up against for a long time. And if you don't know this history, it does not make what the verdict that Claybrook had in January 6, 1938 mean anything. But it means a lot. And you got Claybrook there, who was a property owner, and he owned a lot of land in Arkansas, and rarely did you see even a black person on the jury, but he actually voted to give these 2 black men capital punishment for rape of a white woman. So this is all interesting history, and it all revolves around baseball, because baseball people and people who play baseball are mixed all in it. And if you ever read any of my books, I probably do this as smoothly as anybody, who I can mix social history with my baseball history and not throw you off from the baseball history, because I'm going to always keep it baseball the most I can, right? And so knowing a lot about both of these situations and having history and knowledge that's broad gives me an opportunity to actually deliver information to you guys. So somebody said, Bob Poet said, here's the speech. All right, Bob. Yeah, it's a very entertaining speech. I will tell you this, and most people don't know this too. Frederick Douglass, he had 2 sons, and actually he may have had more than 2, but I know at least 2 of them played baseball. And that first wife passed away. And most people, what they don't know unless you follow closely, Frederick Douglass then married his white secretary. Yep, that is true. He married his white secretary. And how about this? The best man at his second marriage to the wife's secretary was my great uncle, Senator B.K. Bruce. I can't make this stuff up, guys. This is part of my heritage, so I'm always happy to talk about Frederick Douglass, because my family knew him very well. And if you go to his house in Washington, D.C., he's actually set outside of Washington, D.C., and on the wall is a picture of my great uncle, Senator B.K. Bruce. And the house was left intact by his white secretary, who knew that it was going to be important. And so that is the history. Yeah, so somebody said, what was the name of their teams? I think they played for the Washington Mutual team. It could have been some other ones too. And this is all around the time of the Pythian Club, and around that period just after the Civil War. So yeah, we were playing baseball all the way back. And a lot of people don't know that history. So, and there's getting to be more and more written about these teams. If you want to learn some early history, you can pick up my book, The Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History. And it's more than photographs. It's a lot of good history in there, all right? So I only have 2 more facts. I'm going to try to get through these as quickly as I can. They're not as politically charged as the one with the Claybrook Tigers. So, all right, so this was January 6, 1938. George Crow participating in a boys' club Thursday night jump roping contest finished second with 186 consecutive jumps, and the champion won by 229 jumps without a miss. And that took place in Franklin, Indiana. Okay. And how many people know about George Crowe? Oh, he was a great baseball player. Made his debut with the St. Louis Cardinals in 1961, and he appeared on many baseball cards. He was a great basketball player as well, but he was evidently just a great athlete. So here he is, as a teenager winning a a, a jump rope contest, right? And so, hey, they need to bring some of these activities back for youth because they were fun. And they help people to become physically fit. And as I go around, I was at a high school basketball game last night here in Kansas City, where I saw Center High School. They beat Northeast High School, like it was like 99 to 38 or some score like that. And I could just see some of these guys are not getting trained properly. They're not getting coached well. And, I hate to see some of these lopsided wins, but I know a good trained team can do wonders when it comes to beating somebody who's not properly trained. So I was there last night, and actually, the funny thing was, I was waiting to see how the score clock was going to treat, because it didn't look like it had room for 3 digits, and so I was wanting to see if Center High School would make 100 points, but then when it was 5 seconds left, Center went down the court, and a guy on the other team, which was the Northeast, fouled him. And so he fouled him before the game had ended. So technically, he was supposed to go to the free throw line and shoot those points, and then the game would end, even though time had expired. However, the umpire, the referee, I think he said, "I've seen enough." And so he, at that particular point, he called the game and walked off. And so the score ended up at 99. So anyway, sports are still fun. So go out and support some youth, guys. Go out and see some games and support some youth. Bob says that George Crowe, ex-New York Black Yankee, Henry Aaron's barnstorming team. Yep. Jackie Robinson, what I want to say. I'm just drawing a blank on his name. Yep, he played with those teams. And then also, he played professional basketball as well with the Los Angeles Red Devils. I don't know if you heard of them. Jackie Robinson played for them as well. And who else played for them? So he also played for, I think, the Harlem Yankees basketball team. Yeah, George Crowe was quite the basketball player. And then he was selected as the Mr. Indiana basketball in I think it was 1939. So anyway, that is the history of that guy. Yeah, and you're correct. DC Mutuals and the Alerts. All right, I did get one of them right. All of this. A lot of times, guys, I'm just talking from memory. That comes from all these years of just presenting on these subjects in different parts of the country and just talking and studying. I never have stopped studying. All right. So I've got one more, guys. One more. And I want to thank everybody for joining me here. This has been a long edition. Normally, I just try to do about 20 minutes because I know the attention spans are not as long as they used to be. But if you enjoy what I'm doing, you pick up the broadcast later on, by all means, guys, go ahead and subscribe. We need 22 more people to get to 500. And share this broadcast. So let's keep it rolling. I'm hoping that we can get there as soon as possible. Certainly by the end of January, because we just started. Maybe we'll go for 600. Who knows, right? All right. Somebody said, "Oh, let it go a full hour." Bob, I don't think people can last that long. It'll probably just be me and you if we go that long. All right. So here we go. The last fact of the day. January 6, 1946. This is an edition of the Oakland Tribune under a report titled "Racial Intolerance." It stated, and this guy's writing the column there, he said, "A friend who recently returned from the East tells me that racial intolerance is already making its appearance in certain international league circles." And this is a response to Jackie Robinson announcing that he was going to be playing in the International League in 1946. So the season hasn't started. This is January the 6th, 1946. So it's early in the year. Okay, and Jackie was going to be playing for Montreal. You probably know that history. He said there were at least two cities in the circuit, Baltimore and Buffalo, where Robinson will not be allowed to appear. Now, this is an article that's coming out of the Oakland Tribune, and he said he has good sources that's letting him know that this is the opposition that they're going to put forth in 1946. Well, we know that Jackie Robinson went on and played. Now, however, most of the time, the South gets a lot of the negative attention for racial discrimination, especially during this period. But how about this? Baltimore and Buffalo. Baltimore and Buffalo, you know where they're situated, right? You got one in Maryland, you got one in New York, and Buffalo is almost in Canada. Okay, and they said, well, Robinson, they don't want him to play, and it says so strong is the sentiment that a deal is already cooking. How about this? Among International League club owners. Now, I don't know who these owners are. I would love to do a little more research, and it says. To raise a jackpot and hand it to Robinson if he will consent to transfer to another league. This is America in 1946. Jackie Robinson goes on to win the most valuable player for Montreal in the International League. And guys, history changes for many, many years and hopefully forever. We don't need to go back to this period where we have a Negro League, a Major League that, well, sometimes I even hate to say Major League because when you say Major League, you think this is the top league, and it wasn't always the top league. So, but I can't say American and National League, right? So anyway, hopefully we never return to that. But this is the fight that Jackie Robinson is about to have. And so I'm going to give you more and more little pieces of this that maybe you've never heard. And these are going to come from actual articles. So who knows? Maybe I might be able to find out who the owner of the Baltimore and Buffalo team, who are these people? I'd like to know myself, right? Somebody says that years later, Luke Easter was on their team. That's right. He was a great player in the International League, Luke Easter. Luke Easter's grandson. I talked to him. I've talked to him last fall. I need to give him a call again. We were hoping to get a little more attention for Luke Easter. I remember when he passed in the 1970s. And yeah, that was a kind of shocking story. Luke Easter was a great home run hitter. Somebody that I think probably hit 500 home runs, but they weren't all in one league. So if you count what he did in the minor leagues, what he did in the Negro leagues, what he did in the winter leagues, you will get 500 home runs for Luke Easter. Yeah, just a great hitter. And I remember the first time the Monarchs faced him, I wrote about that in a book that I wrote about John Buck O'Neill, 1938. They came through and they played the St. Louis Giants. This is the Kansas City Monarchs playing the St. Louis Giants in 1938. St. Louis was not in the league, and the Monarchs went there, and they beat the Kansas City Monarchs, who were in the league. Doc Bracken pitched for the St. Louis team. Great pitcher. He ended up coming up to the league. Doc Bracken. He ended up pitching in the military at Three Rivers. Three Rivers, same place as several guys who went on to the major league. I think Larry Dopey was at Three Rivers. Somebody was, and he pitched for them as well. But Doc Bracken, I did get a chance to interview him in St. Louis, and he's got children still around. Doc Bracken, yeah. So Luke Easter was a part of that team. Later on, people like Sam Jethro and a lot of this information related to the St. Louis area, whether it was about Elston Howard or Eli Chisholm, or I can go on and on, came from Cool Papa Bell and Normal Tweed Webb. Those were two guys that really supplied me with a lot of knowledge. Now, if you go online and you're able to get newspapers online, if they have the St. Louis newspaper in there, and you can get a Tweed Webb article, go ahead and read Tweed Webb. Tweed Webb is vastly underrepresented in his history, in his knowledge of especially St. Louis and the Tandy League there, which was one of the major leagues in the city there, the Tandy League there. And so Tweed Webb, and I'm trying to think, what newspaper he wrote for. I do know one of the newspapers was St. Louis American because when Coup Papa Bell passed away, I did write a full page article for the St. Louis American. But there's another newspaper there. I'm just trying to blank on the name. For now. But yeah, that's the newspaper that Normal Tweed Webb. There you go, St. Louis Argus. That is correct. That's the newspaper that Tweed Webb wrote for. Tweed Webb, wonderful guy. If you went in his house, he lived on Enright. And if you remember, if you ever watched the old Red Fox show, he talks about living on Enright. Tweed actually lived on Enright. I go down there and you go in his house, it was like a museum. He had all these pictures and things around, and man, I just learned so much from Tweed Webb. Guys, I wouldn't be here today if not for my ancestors who have passed on now, giving me wonderful information. As a young guy, I was like, started off as maybe a 20-year-old guy, 23, 22, somewhere in there. And and I just talked to people and I learned so much, guys. I man, I don't know where I would be if God hadn't given me this interest in baseball, and then gave me some people in my community to talk to. So I was embraced by and loved by many people. And so I'm trying to share some of this love with you guys. And even if you don't like baseball, and I do run into people who are not baseball fans at all, uh, get around somebody who knows the game and they can teach you about the game. It's a wonderful sport, but it has history that is unlike any history of any sport in America. But if you follow any sport in America, you will see that a lot of them lead right back to baseball. So that kind of does it for me today, guys. Bob, I wish I could stay on here. Look, 36 minutes. I guess I'm going to get off here about maybe 39 minutes. That's a long broadcast for me. And I certainly hope, I'm glad that you called me, and I'm glad all the rest of you did. And once again, if someone's listening after this broadcast is over, by all means, go ahead and subscribe and come on back and let's talk a little baseball, especially this time of year. This is what we used to call hot stove season, because all you could in the old days, all the old guys could do was sit around a coal burning stove down maybe at the barber shop, at the general store, somewhere in the community, and talk a little baseball. And they talk about the season past or years gone by, people they knew, and maybe an old player would show up and give a story or two about who they knew. And without me realizing, guys, in 40 years, I turned out to be one of those guys. I don't have a stove anymore. So this is our hot stove right here. It's a hot spot on the internet. So thank you, guys. And Bob, thank you. And who else we have in here? We got different people just popping in. There's always someone who follows me from Minnesota. I appreciate that. And thank you for the reference on Joey Bale. Yeah, I thank Pat Tabler for that. And Pat Tabler was a good friend. He retired just a few years ago, being a broadcaster for the Toronto Blue Jays. So I'd love to see Pat again and have a conversation with him about all the things that we experienced. I have good pictures. When we used to go on the caravan. Well, you know what? I'm gonna tell you one more story. One more story, and now I'm really gone after this. One more story. When I was a kid, I had a subscription to the Sports Illustrated. And in the back, they used to have a little thing there where they would talk about things that people, amateur athletes had achieved. If you go find an old Sports Illustrated, you'll see that little area in the back. Man, I always wanted, I was playing ball. I always wanted to be in there. Of course, never got in there. But my dream was to one day get mentioned in the Sports Illustrated. I wanted that so badly because I grew up reading it, and I love the Sports Illustrated. And the interesting thing, the way I got my subscription was this. I didn't have any money as a little kid. I'm probably in sixth grade. Didn't have any money, and I would get a Sports Illustrated from wherever I could find one. And sometime a neighbor might have one. Sometime I would just find old worn out issues of Sports Illustrated. So one day I'm looking through this Sports Illustrated, and it had a little card in there trying to get people subscribed. So it said, subscribe now and pay later. I think subscription might have been like $4 a year. Of course, I didn't have $4. Hey, like I was, and what nickels I had, I'm spending on baseball cards, right? So, but they said subscribe now and pay later. Now they should have never told me that. I sent that card in, and they started sending me my subscription, man, and I got the Sports Illustrated. I was really reading it then. And I think they're still waiting on their $3 or $4. Maybe I need to send them a check, and if they're still in business. Uh, but yeah, I never did send that $4, but I kept reading the Sports Illustrated. But in I want to say it was probably 1989. Uh, it was myself, Frank White, and Gerald Perry. We were doing the Royals Caravan, and Pete Gammons came down. He was doing an article for the Sports Illustrated, and it was an article about Ewan Kaufman and how he branched out and how important the Caravan was to the Kansas City Royals. And the Caravan would go out in February. We'd go down to down south. We go as far as from Kansas City. We'd go to Springfield, and then west we would go out to maybe Sunlinum. I think that's as far as we went west. Then we go up north to Lincoln and Omaha, and then we didn't go very deep into Iowa because that was kind of like Cubs territory. And so if you got around Des Moines, most of the people up around Des Moines were following the Cubs. So we didn't really cover that territory, but we covered a lot of territory through those little 4 states. And I was one of the people who put that caravan together. So Pete Gammons came down and he rode with us, and a photographer was with us too. This guy must have taken maybe about, I want to say 3,000 prints to use 2 for the article. And so we rode around going through Kansas, and I remember the photographer, he knew what he's looking for. And we saw a field out there, and he said, that's where I want to take the picture. So I was driving, I stopped the van. We go over, and it was a farmhouse. We asked the farmer, could we use his yard to take this picture? And so we get out of the car, and he takes a picture of Gerald Perry and Frank White that appeared in the Sports Illustrated. And now he also took one of me with them, and one with, I think Pete Gammons was with them too, but that one didn't appear in the magazine, but that one was just for us, right? And he took that picture, and when the article came out, it talked about me setting up the caravan, and I finally got my name mentioned in the Sports Illustrated. Man, that was a special day for me because it was something I had wanted to do ever since I was in elementary school. But I finally got my name in Sports Illustrated, and I do have a couple of copies of that now in my archives. So guys, that's it for me. These are the stories that I can tell through Baseball Tales. And story, I hope somebody will join me tomorrow, because I'm going to make a note to tell a story of, it was a small town, I think it was Savannah, Missouri, and they had a great high school basketball player there. I wish I knew his name. And we would go there, and so in consecutive years, I got this high school player to play against Tom Gordon, a one-on-one in the gym in front of the whole school, and then Kevin Seitzer. And I'll tell that story. And of course, this high school ball player beat both of them, and both of those guys were bragging to me about how well they played baseball, but they didn't know that I knew about this high school player, and I had called ahead, and I was going to do a one-on-one with them. Man, it went over so big. I remember getting back to the Royals and Dean Vogelar saying, man, you probably shouldn't have these guys, participating like that when you're out on the caravan, but the players loved it. And anytime if I see Kevin Seitzer or Tom Gordon, I still follow Tom Gordon. He has a great page on Instagram. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Go look him up, Tom Gordon. He has a great page on Instagram. Go ahead and follow him, and just let him know that Phil Dixon said to follow him, right? But anyway, yeah, they actually played. It was in Savannah, Missouri. I wonder if they remember that. So anyway, guys, for real, I'm out of here. 45 minutes. I appreciate and I love you all. Stay with me, and we will continue to have fun in the name of baseball history. This has been the January 6th, 2026 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History.